To vanish without a trace is one thing. To return decades later, unchanged, is something the world cannot explain. It was June 14th, 1983, when Daniel Morgan, 34, a seasoned park ranger in the Rocky Mountains near Estes Park, Colorado, set out on what should have been a routine patrol. The sky was crisp, the air sharp with pine, and the trail beneath his boots seemed ordinary. Yet by nightfall, Daniel had disappeared. Search teams combed every ridge, every ravine, every glade. Days stretched into weeks, weeks into months. They found nothing, not a campsite, not footprints, not even his hat, wedged under a jagged boulder. The mountains, which Daniel knew as intimately as the back of his hand, had swallowed him whole. His family clung to hope, but the years pressed on relentlessly, and by 1987, Daniel Morgan was officially declared missing. And yet, even then, his story, quietly filed under Unsolved in Dusty Records, was far from over. In September 2021, a hiker stumbled upon an isolated village tucked deep in the northern Rockies, miles from any marked trail. There, leaning against the weathered railing of a wooden cabin, was a man whose features seemed impossibly familiar. The villagers called him Daniel because that was the name he spoke, though his voice had the cadence of someone out of time. Authorities were immediately alerted. When Daniel was escorted back to the nearest town, he walked with a calm, deliberate pace, as if the decades he'd missed were merely a dream or a pause. Yet when asked where he had been, his eyes clouded with confusion. He remembered fragments, sunlight on moss, the snap of twigs, the smell of damp earth, but nothing that resembled the modern world he had returned to. Questions exploded. How could he survive 40 years in the wilderness? Why had he aged so little? And most hauntingly, what had he experienced during those lost years? Daniel's arrival sparked immediate scrutiny. Doctors examined him, expecting the signs of malnutrition or exposure, but they found none. His heart, lungs, and muscles were in near-perfect condition, as though the years had slid past him without leaving a mark. "It's biologically impossible," one physician whispered, shaking his head. Daniel himself seemed unfazed by the attention, wandering the hospital corridors with a quiet curiosity, like a child discovering a strange house. But each room, each modern appliance, seemed alien, triggering subtle panic and disorientation. And then there was the matter of his speech. His words carried traces of 1980s colloquialisms, rhythms of thought, and cadence untouched by decades. Researchers began to speculate wildly. Was he some kind of human anomaly, preserved by the wilderness? Or had something else occurred that defied explanation? Every theory, however rational, left more questions than answers. The first interview with his family was a delicate scene. Daniel's mother, now in her 70s, clutched his hands, trembling. "Daniel, is it really you?" she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. He nodded slowly, almost mechanically. They spoke in halting phrases at first, afraid to shatter the fragile bridge between the past and the present. He asked about old trails, the small cabin where he used to eat lunch, the names of his park ranger colleagues. Each question brought tears and disbelief. Yet when asked about the missing decades, he faltered. A shadow crossed his face. I don't remember," he said. "It's like there was nothing, but sometimes I feel it." That feeling hinted at a presence beyond memory, an invisible landscape that had shaped him far more than any trail or river ever could. Authorities attempted to retrace his path, but the mountains had shifted. Trails had overgrown, streams had rerouted, and decades of erosion had altered the landscape Daniel once knew intimately. Still, when they asked him to guide them, he moved as though the terrain whispered its secrets directly to him. He paused at certain rocks, brushed aside leaves, muttered to himself, and then stopped dead, staring at a ridge he hadn't seen in years. "We never went this far," a ranger whispered. Daniel shook his head. "I did." He refused to elaborate. The village, once so welcoming, now seemed an extension of the mountains themselves, holding him in some strange custody all these years. Experts noted that he seemed to sense paths, dangers, and resources that no one else could detect, a survival instinct honed to a level impossible in ordinary humans. Daniel's first night back in a town home was surreal. The hum of electricity, the flicker of streetlights outside, even the smell of canned food. Every sensation triggered small frights. He woke at 2:14 a.m., staring at the ceiling, whispering coordinates and landmarks no one understood. His family tried to calm him, but his eyes were fixed on a shadowed corner. There, watching, he muttered, "I shouldn't be here." Fear and longing intertwined. Fear of the outside world, longing for the mountains he could barely name but instinctively knew. Sleep came fitfully, each hour stretching into endless loops of dreams populated by indistinct figures, the crash of waterfalls, and whispers carried on the wind. Even doctors admitted it was unlike any post-traumatic response they had ever studied. Local journalists swarmed, eager to capture Daniel's story. Cameras followed him as he walked the streets of Estes Park, now bustling with cafes, cars, and tourists. He paused often, captivated by neon signs, motorcycles, and children playing with devices he couldn't identify. Yet he also hesitated, recoiling from certain noises and crowds. One reporter pressed, "How did you survive?" Daniel looked away, voice low. "I wasn't surviving. I was waiting." The words were simple, yet chilling. Waiting for what or whom remained a mystery. Speculation ran rampant. Had he been trapped by a hidden valley, sustained by unknown villagers, or guided by forces beyond explanation? No evidence of captivity emerged. Nothing indicated any other humans, yet his health and memory gaps suggested extraordinary circumstances. Then came the first major breakthrough, a series of carvings on a tree in the remote village. The marks, weathered by decades, appeared to form a calendar of sorts, detailing seasonal changes and natural phenomena. Researchers were stunned. The carvings indicated precise tracking of time, as if Daniel, or someone guiding him, had meticulously chronicled 40 years. But why? And why had he returned now? When confronted, Daniel studied the carvings with a strange reverence. "It's right," he murmured. "They told me to wait. Until it was time." The ambiguity was maddening. Who they were, and why time mattered, remained completely opaque. As weeks passed, Daniel began testing modern tools, flashlights, radios, even a GPS device. He held them awkwardly at first, unsure if they were alive or merely props. Then, gradually, his skill sharpened. Yet each success carried a subtle tension. He seemed to know instinctively that certain items might be dangerous. He refused to turn on the stove, avoided leaving the house after dark, and always checked windows and doors repeatedly. Psychologists speculated that his survival instincts had rewired his perception entirely. What kept him alive in the wild, hyper-awareness, caution, and attunement to natural rhythms, remained deeply ingrained, defying conventional rehabilitation into modern life. By December 2021, Daniel had settled into a pattern, walking long distances in the foothills, studying maps, helping his former park colleagues in conservation work, yet never fully embracing the modern world. Occasionally, he would pause, staring at a horizon only he could interpret. "It's calling," he whispered once to a colleague. "It's always calling." Every word was a thread pulling the listener toward a larger, unresolved question. Had Daniel's disappearance been merely a survival feat, or had he glimpsed something hidden, profound, and almost otherworldly that explained the decades he could not recall? His family, authorities, and scientists alike were captivated. Some speculated it was a neurological anomaly. Others suggested spiritual intervention. Still others believed it might be evidence of endurance far beyond human comprehension. And now, Even as the world watches him walk quietly along the snow-dusted trails of the Rockies, the question lingers. Will Daniel ever fully return, or is he forever tethered to the mountains that once swallowed him? Each glance he casts at the distant peaks carries tension, awe, and an unspoken promise that his story is not yet complete. Something in those peaks waits something he instinctively knows, and the truth, whether terrifying or miraculous, may never fully reveal itself. But one thing is certain: Daniel Morgan survived. And survival, in this case, is only the beginning. On September 12, 1995, in the shadowed heart of the Florida Everglades, Park Ranger Marlene Ortiz stepped into the mangroves near Shark River and was never seen again. For nearly 3 decades, her name lingered on missing persons posters, whispered in ranger stations, and etched in the memory of her family lost, mourned, but never forgotten. The search teams scoured swamps, patrolled rivers, and even used helicopters, but the Everglades held its secrets tight. Officials declared her presumed dead by December of that year, leaving her family with grief that hardened into a strange, quiet resignation. And yet, something impossible happened in 2024, near a remote lakeshore deep in the Everglades, where a woman matching Marlene's description appeared as if she had walked out of the shadows of time itself. No phone, no wallet, no modern trace nothing. Only a lone figure, disoriented, fragile, yet alive. When authorities arrived, the reunion was immediate, raw, and almost too intense to witness. Marlene's parents, now in their late 70s, fell to the ground, clutching her hands, shaking, laughing, and crying all at once. She barely recognized them, though her eyes carried a flicker of their shared history. I remember little," she murmured, voice trembling. "The trees, water, voices. Sometimes." Every word was fragmented, a puzzle missing its central piece. Experts quickly moved in, amazed not only by her survival, but by her condition. Her body, lean but remarkably strong, bore no signs of malnutrition. Her skin, tanned and weathered by the sun, had the resilience of someone who had truly lived outdoors for decades. Doctors could not explain how she had maintained such health without modern medicine, processed food, or even consistent shelter. And mentally, though gaps remained, she was lucid, intelligent, and alert, but haunted by shadows of lost years. The first interviews with Marlene were cautious. She wandered along the lakeshore during the day, eyes scanning the horizon as though expecting something or someone to emerge from the Everglades' dense brush. "I remember the water, but not why I stayed," she admitted, pausing as her gaze followed the rippling lake. Investigators began to reconstruct her movements, theorizing a possible self-imposed isolation or accidental entrapment. Local residents, old and new, came forward with stories of glimpses of a lone woman along the Everglades' edges. Some claimed she moved silently, blending with the cypress roots, a shadow among shadows. But Marlene never remembered meeting them. She could recall survival techniques, the kind taught in ranger training, but no memories of human contact after 1995. Every detail she offered hinted at both incredible resilience and profound solitude, raising unsettling questions. How did she find food, water, shelter? How did she withstand Florida's merciless heat, insects, and storms? Marlene's return sparked a flurry of scientific attention. Anthropologists, psychologists, and medical specialists descended on the lakeshore to study her. Dr. Samuel Ivers, a leading survivalist expert, expressed both admiration and disbelief. "It's astonishing. Physically, she's in better condition than many urban dwellers of the same age. Mentally, the brain compensates in strange ways under isolation. But decades without social interaction? That's unprecedented." Marlene's own family struggled to reconcile the woman they embraced with the child they had known. Her younger brother, Luis, asked with a quiver, Did you ever think of us? She shook her head. Sometimes voices. But I couldn't reach you. I tried, or maybe I imagined it. I don't know. Every answer deepened the mystery. Each fragmentary memory seemed to exist on the edge of a dream, hinting at events that might never be fully recovered. Even in modern Florida, the Everglades remained a formidable antagonist. Dense foliage, shifting waters, and labyrinthine waterways make escape or rescue nearly impossible. Marlene's survival could have been aided by instinct alone, or perhaps by some forgotten network of hidden trails, elevated routes, and old ranger caches. But investigators found little evidence of previous habitation along the lakeshore. Her isolation, therefore, must have been intentional, or forced by circumstance, a theory reinforced by the scars on her hands and faint abrasions on her feet. Witnesses recounted seeing her briefly in the distance, crouched by reeds, watching, always observing. She had survived storms, snake bites, heat exhaustion, and hunger. But the emotional toll, loneliness, disorientation, and fractured memory remained invisible. Her ability to endure the natural world without succumbing to fear or despair was remarkable, but also unnerving. The family attempted to reintegrate her into modern life. Cell phones, electricity, and even cars felt alien to Marlene. The first night at her childhood home, she froze by the refrigerator, staring at the blinking light like it might explode. "It's too bright, too fast," she whispered. Social workers tried to help her adjust. Psychologists encouraged storytelling to recover memories, but each attempt seemed to ripple into confusion. Even familiar faces startled her, as if decades of isolation had fundamentally rewired her perception of time and connection. Small conflicts arose. How much control should her family assert? How much freedom should Marlene have in her fragile reintegration? These microdramas mirrored the bigger puzzle. Could someone survive unscathed after nearly 30 years alone in the wilderness? Or had she returned fundamentally changed? Then there were the questions that no science could yet answer. What about her missing years? Could Marlene have encountered others? Could she have built some hidden society or fallen victim to one? Her gaps in memory hinted at both possibilities, and investigators found no conclusive evidence to dismiss either scenario. Locals whispered, half joking, half frightened, about encounters with an unearthly figure in the Everglades, capable of vanishing and reappearing like the swamp mist. Yet Marlene's calm and matter-of-fact demeanor suggested no deliberate trickery, no escape from danger. Her survival was quiet, hidden, almost spectral, but unquestionably real. The suspense of the unknown loomed over every interview, every photograph, every tearful reunion. Months passed, and Marlene began to tell fragments. She spoke of days marked by sun, rain, and night skies, of foraging and building crude shelters, of animals that were both companions and threats. She described an encounter with a violent storm that flooded her lakeshore refuge, washing away everything she had constructed. But she survived, clinging to a submerged cypress root for hours, until the floodwaters receded. She remembered the occasional whistle of an unseen person in the distance, perhaps rangers searching, perhaps something else, but could not place any clear identity. Each story was a delicate weave of memory and imagination, making it impossible to separate truth from reconstruction. And yet, the emotional weight of each recollection made her story visceral, compelling, impossible to ignore. One evening, Marlene's family sat by the lake where she had been found. Fireflies danced along the reeds, and the water reflected the deepening twilight. "Did you ever think you'd see me again?" her father asked softly, voice cracking. Marlene shook her head, letting the silence answer for her. The wind whispered through the mangroves, carrying both the Everglades' threats and its promise of life. It was a quiet, fragile victory, the reclamation of someone thought lost, yet not entirely restored. And still, the questions lingered. How did she survive with such isolation? What had she seen, and what had she forgotten? Could anyone truly endure what she endured and remain whole? These mysteries would continue to haunt the family, the investigators, and the experts alike. Ultimately, Marlene's story is a testament to human resilience and to the mysteries of nature. Her return defied explanation, challenged science, and offered a fragile hope to those who mourn long-forgotten loved ones. Yet, even as she rebuilt connections, learned to navigate technology, and revisited her old home, the Everglades' shadow remained. Its silence, its wildness, and its uncanny ability to erase and conceal, these were as much a part of Marlene as her laughter, her tears, and her memory. Will we ever know the full truth of those missing decades? Perhaps not. But in her survival, we witness the astonishing capacity of humans to endure, and the chilling reminder that some stories, even when they end, continue to hold secrets. On May 14, 1989, Victor Nuian, a park ranger in Arizona's vast Tonto National Forest, disappeared without a trace. His shift had ended at dusk, leaving his jeep parked near a remote canyon. But when colleagues returned the next morning, there was no Victor, just his campsite. A small fire pit still smoldered, his boots neatly placed beside the tent, and a notebook left open on the ground. Weeks of searching turned into months. Helicopters swept the canyons, hounds scoured the scrubland, yet nothing was found. Every lead ended in frustration, every theory more desperate than the last. Some whispered that the desert had swallowed him whole. Others thought he'd fled, leaving a carefully staged scene behind. But the truth, whatever it was, remained buried. And when the desert refuses to give up its secrets, it changes the story entirely. In early June of that year, the ranger team retraced Victor's patrol route. They noted his favorite waterhole, the twisted junipers he liked to sketch in his notebook. But strange signs puzzled them. Footprints that seemed to start and stop abruptly, as if someone had vanished mid-step. Rangers reported hearing faint whistles echoing through the canyon at night, though the canyon was usually silent. One searcher, a young trainee named Luis, claimed he felt eyes watching him from the scrub, though there was no one there. Tension built, nerves frayed. Some began to suspect they weren't just dealing with a missing ranger, something in the desert itself was wrong. Campfires seemed cooler than expected. Shadows stretched unnaturally long. Yet no one could explain why Victor's trail ended so suddenly. And as the weeks dragged on, the forest seemed to swallow every trace, as though Victor had never existed outside that campsite. The question lingered, heavy and insistent. Was he lost, or had he chosen to disappear? Decades passed. Arizona shifted. Cities grew, highways expanded, and the desert remained unchanged in its stubborn solitude. But in 2022, everything flipped. A hiker, exploring a canyon near the Salt River, stumbled upon a man emerging from a narrow ravine. His clothes were rudimentary leather patched with desert flora, and his hair long and unkempt. At first, the hiker thought it was a hallucination, but the man spoke in careful English, his voice calm but deliberate. He said his name, Victor Nuian. Shock rippled across local media and federal investigators alike. How could a man vanish for 33 years and survive without modern tools? No phones, no GPS, no supply caches, just knowledge of the land and an instinct for survival. Witnesses described his appearance as strikingly familiar from old photographs. The same eyes, the same quiet determination. But when asked to recount the years, Victor hesitated, his gaze fixed on the horizon. As though time itself had broken into fragments he couldn't piece together. Victor's reintegration into the modern world wasn't easy. Doctors examined him for malnutrition, dehydration, and mental strain. Psychologists interviewed him for hours, hoping to unlock the story of those lost decades. But Victor's answers were sparse. He described the desert in terms almost poetic: sunrises that stretched like molten gold, nights so cold the stars seemed close enough to touch, waterholes that whispered. He spoke of predators, snakes, coyotes, and the heat itself as both threat and teacher. I learned to wait, to watch, to be part of the desert, he said. But the gaps in his memory were vast. He couldn't account for months, let alone years. Family members, long convinced of his death, struggled with disbelief and joy. Yet Victor's calm, steady presence unsettled some. How could he endure decades without communication, without human contact, and return with his mind intact? Authorities remained baffled. And beneath the media frenzy, the desert still held its secret, refusing to reveal the full story. Small mysteries emerged around Victor's survival. Tracks in the sand suggested ingenious methods of water collection: small dug basins, condensation traps, but these were unlike anything recorded in survival manuals. He had fashioned simple shelters from natural materials, camouflaging them so well that even trained trackers could not find them. Occasionally, he mentioned encounters with other figures in the desert, shadows that came and went, never close enough to touch. Investigators speculated about hermits, secret communities, or even hallucinations brought on by isolation. Yet Victor insisted he had been alone. The desert, he claimed, became both companion and adversary. Every day presented a challenge: venomous snakes in the rocks, sudden dust storms, scorpions hiding in crevices. But he adapted. He moved quietly, avoided notice, learned patterns of animals and weather. And through all of it, one central question haunted everyone listening to his story. What did he truly see? And what had the desert demanded of him in return? As months passed, journalists tried to reconstruct his routine. One reporter, Mara, ventured into the canyon with Victor, hoping for answers. She noticed how he handled the landscape with almost reverent precision, identifying plants for food, signaling birds' flight paths, reading winds. "You learn patience," he murmured, watching a snake slither across sand. "You learn timing, and to survive, you obey." But Mara also sensed tension in his movements, a lingering distrust of modern tools and people. He would flinch at sudden noises, hesitate before crossing open ground. Even as he spoke of the desert's beauty, there was a hard edge to his recollections, moments where fear and instinct had ruled over humanity. Mara recorded everything, captivated and unsettled. Each detail deepened the mystery rather than resolving it. And she realized that in Victor's silence about certain years lay the heart of the story, the core puzzle everyone wanted solved. Victor's family struggled to connect with him after decades apart. His sister Lynn wanted stories, hugs, explanations. But Victor offered fragments, not narratives. He spoke of his mother's favorite fig trees in Tucson, of sunburned arms under the Arizona sun, of loneliness so vast it became almost a living presence. Yet when pressed about certain stretches of time, he shook his head. "Some things," he said quietly, "aren't meant to be found." Lynn's frustration battled with relief. The years lost couldn't be reclaimed, but his return was a miracle. Friends who had aged and moved on were caught between disbelief and admiration. And as Victor walked again through towns, marketplaces, and parks, he carried an aura of the desert's stillness, caution, and strength, like a man both here and elsewhere, tethered to time, yet untouched by it. Investigators and scientists tried experiments, recreating survival scenarios, analyzing soil samples from his makeshift camps. None could replicate his resourcefulness, his ability to anticipate dangers, or his quiet ingenuity. Some suggested rare genetic resilience. Others posited an almost mystical adaptation to the desert, but Victor never claimed anything extraordinary. "It's just learning to listen," he said, eyes scanning the horizon as a hawk circled overhead. Meanwhile, media attention brought speculation and scrutiny. Conspiracy theories flourished. Some claimed he had been in a secret program, or abducted, or lost in a temporal anomaly. Victor neither confirmed nor denied any of it. He returned to the desert, retracing old paths. Some nights he would vanish for days, and his family would wait, anxious and unsure. But each time he returned, as if the desert itself had tested him, only to release him at its own pace. Finally, after years of interviews, investigations, and documentaries, one truth remained clear. Victor Nuian had survived the unimaginable. The exact details, however, remained tantalizingly out of reach. His story, whispered through deserts and newspapers alike, showcased the incredible resilience of humans. It asked profound questions about isolation, adaptation, and the limits of endurance. Even now, Victor sometimes disappears into the canyons for weeks, returning with the same calm, distant gaze. He carries no technology, no record of the years lost. And the ultimate question, how a single man could vanish into the harshest desert, live, and emerge decades later, remains unsolved. The desert keeps its secret. And perhaps, as Victor silently watches the wind-shaping sand dunes, that is exactly how it intends to keep it. Some mysteries are hidden in the wild, and many are never solved. Subscribe and witness the next true disappearance every other day.